The prairie wind carried the sound of a heart breaking as Teresa Fletcher fell to her knees at the freshly dug grave. Wyoming Territory, 1875, had taken everything from her husband to a mining accident, and now her 6-year-old son to scarlet fever. The small wooden cross bore the name Samuel Fletcher, carved by her own trembling hands just hours before. Teresa's dress was stained with the red earth as she began to dig beside her son's grave with her bare hands. She had nothing left to live for. If she couldn't hold her child in this life, she would embrace him in death. The soil tore at her fingernails until they bled, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the agony in her heart. "What in God's name are you doing?" A deep voice called from behind her. Teresa didn't turn around. "Leave me be," she said, continuing to claw at the ground. "I've nothing left, nothing." Heavy boots approached, and she felt strong hands grip her shoulders, pulling her away from the grave. She fought against them with what little strength she had left. "Let me go." She screamed, her voice raw from days of crying. "Let me be with my boy." The man turned her around, and through her tears she saw a weathered face with kind eyes. His dark hat shaded his features, but she could see the concern etched there. "He needs you still," the cowboy said firmly, nodding toward a small bundle nestled under a nearby tree. "Your other son needs you." Teresa's gaze followed his gesture to where her 2-year-old Thomas slept wrapped in a blanket. In her grief, she had almost forgotten her youngest child. The realization of what she had been about to do washed over her like ice water. The cowboy's grip softened. "Name's Kieran Sullivan. I was passing through when I heard crying. Thought someone might need help." He looked at her bleeding hands. "Seems I was right." Teresa stared at her sleeping son, shame and grief battling within her. I don't know how to go on." "You don't have to know right now," Kieran said, his voice low and gentle. "Just keep breathing for today. Tomorrow will come whether we want it to or not." As the sun set over the Wyoming plains, Teresa allowed the stranger to lead her back to her small homestead, carrying her sleeping child. She moved as if in a dream, hollowed out by grief. But something in the cowboy's words had reached her, a small spark of responsibility that kept her taking one step, and then another. The cabin was modest, a single room with a wood stove, table, 2 beds, and few possessions. Teresa mechanically prepared a simple meal while Kieran tended to her wounded hands, washing away the dirt and blood with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance. "Where were you headed?" Teresa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nowhere in particular," Kieran replied. "Been drifting since the war ended. Worked some cattle drives, did some scouting. Most recently I was guiding a group of settlers, but that job finished in Laramie." "We came out here 3 years ago," Teresa said, looking around the cabin as if seeing it for the first time. "James, my husband, thought we could make something of this land. Then the mine collapse took him last winter." Kieran nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Lost my brother in those mines. Dangerous work." Teresa placed a bowl of beans and salt pork before him. "It's not much." "It's more than I expected tonight," Kieran said with genuine gratitude. "Thank you." As night fell, Teresa sat by her son's bed watching him sleep. Kieran made himself comfortable on a bedroll near the door. "I'll be gone at first light," he said. "But is there anything I can help with before I go?" Teresa hesitated. "The roof leaks when it rains. James never got around to fixing it." "I can take care of that," Kieran nodded. "Then I'll be on my way." But when morning came and the roof was mended, Teresa found herself unable to watch him leave. The thought of facing the emptiness alone was overwhelming. There's a plot of land that needs plowing," she said hesitantly. "I can pay you a little, not much, but—" Kieran studied her face. "I'll stay a few days, get you sorted." A few days turned into a week as Kieran helped with the tasks that had fallen into disrepair since James's death. He fixed the corral, mended fences, and plowed the small field where Teresa planned to plant vegetables. Each night, he slept outside under the stars, refusing Teresa's offer of the cabin floor. On the 8th day, as they worked side by side in the garden, Teresa found herself watching how gentle he was with the seedlings, those same hands that could break a wild horse now carefully arranging tender plants in the soil. "Why are you helping us?" she asked suddenly. Kieran didn't look up from his work. "Because I can." "That's not an answer." He sat back on his heels, wiping his brow with his sleeve. Maybe I'm tired of drifting. Maybe I needed to remember what it's like to be useful. He glanced at her. Maybe seeing someone hurt as bad as you were hurting reminded me there are things worse than my own troubles. Teresa nodded, accepting his words. Later that evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, young Thomas toddled over to Kieran and climbed into his lap without hesitation. The cowboy looked startled but didn't push the child away. Sorry, Teresa said. He's not usually so forward with strangers. Guess I'm not much of a stranger anymore, Kieran replied, awkwardly patting the boy's back. He's a good kid. He looks like his father, Teresa said softly. Samuel looked more like me. Kieran hesitated before speaking. Tell me about Samuel. The question caught Teresa off guard. Most people avoided mentioning her dead son, afraid to cause her more pain. But instead of hurting, she found she wanted to talk about him. He was so curious. Always asking questions about everything. Why is the sky blue? Where do animals sleep? How do birds know where to fly? A small smile touched her lips. He would follow James everywhere, trying to do everything his father did. Kieran listened as she spoke, the memories flowing from her like water breaking through a dam. For the first time since Samuel's death, Teresa felt the weight in her chest lighten slightly. Not gone, but bearable. The next morning, riders approached the homestead. 3 men, rough-looking and armed. Teresa watched from the window as Kieran stepped out to meet them. Sullivan, the leader called. Thought that was your horse, long way from Kansas. Reeves, Kieran acknowledged with a nod. What brings you to these parts? Looking for hands for a cattle drive. Good money. The man's eyes flicked to the cabin. Didn't realize you were settled. Just helping out a widow and her boy, Kieran said. Passing through, the man named Reeves smirked. Always were a soft touch for a hard luck case. He tipped his hat toward the cabin. Madam, he called, seeing Teresa in the window. Your man here is one of the best trail hands in the territory. You're lucky to have him around. Before Teresa could correct him, Kieran spoke. I'll walk you out, Reeves. They moved away from the cabin, speaking in low voices. When Kieran returned, his expression was troubled. Friends of yours? Teresa asked. Acquaintances, he corrected. Worked a drive with them last year. They wanted you to go with them, Kieran nodded. Good money in cattle these days. Teresa felt her heart sink. Of course he would leave. Everyone left eventually. When will you go? I told them no. The simple statement hung in the air between them. Teresa didn't know what to say, so she said nothing, but something warm unfurled in her chest. Spring turned to summer and Kieran remained. He built a small addition to the cabin for himself, insisting it was only proper. They fell into a routine working the land, caring for the animals, raising Thomas together. They never discussed how long he would stay. Both afraid to break the fragile peace they had found, Teresa watched as Thomas grew attached to Kieran, following him everywhere just as Samuel had followed James. It brought both joy and pain to see her son with a father figure again. One evening, as they sat by the fire after Thomas was asleep, Kieran cleared his throat. There's a town meeting tomorrow. Seems the railroad might be coming through these parts. That could change everything, Teresa said. For better or worse, Kieran agreed. More opportunities, but more people too. Teresa studied his profile in the firelight. Do you ever miss it? The traveling, I mean. Kieran was silent for a long moment. Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it. No roots, no responsibilities beyond the day's work. He looked at her. But no, I don't miss the loneliness of it. Their eyes held, and Teresa felt something shift between them. Not for the first time, she wondered what it would be like to cross the invisible boundary they had established. The next day, they rode into town together for the meeting. It was the first time Teresa had been to town since Samuel's death, and she felt the curious eyes on her as she entered the meeting hall with Kieran at her side. The railroad representative spoke of progress and prosperity, of connecting Wyoming to the rest of the nation. Most of the townsfolk seemed excited, but some of the older ranchers voiced concerns about land rights and cattle drives. As they listened, Teresa became aware of whispers around them. She caught fragments, Widow Fletcher and that drifter, and felt her cheeks grow hot. Pay them no mind, Kieran murmured close to her ear. Small towns run on gossip, but one voice rose above the others. Didn't take her long to find a replacement, did it? Teresa froze, the cruel words cutting through her like a knife. Beside her, Kieran tensed, but before he could respond, an older woman turned and fixed the speaker with a withering glare. "Albert Jenkins, you should be ashamed," the woman said loudly. "That woman buried her husband and child. If she's found some comfort, it's none of your business." The meeting resumed, but Teresa felt sick. She had never considered how others might view her relationship with Kieran. Was it disrespectful to James's memory? To Samuel's on the ride home, she was quiet, the thoughts churning in her mind. Kieran seemed to sense her mood and didn't press her to talk. That night, she dreamt of Samuel. In the dream, he was playing in a sunlit field, laughing. When he saw her, he ran to her, but stopped just out of reach. "It's okay, Mama," he said. "You don't have to be sad anymore." Teresa woke with tears on her cheeks, but a strange peace in her heart. She rose and went outside to find Kieran already at work, splitting wood for the coming winter. "I need to visit Samuel's grave," she said. Kieran set down his axe. "I'll come with you." The small cemetery was on a hill overlooking the valley. Teresa knelt by the grave, which now had wildflowers growing over it. She gently brushed her fingers over the wooden cross. "I think I'm ready to live again," she whispered to her son. "I'll never stop missing you, but I think you and your father would want me to find happiness." As they walked back to their horses, Teresa stopped and turned to Kieran. "Why did you really stay?" The question had been building in her for months. Kieran looked out over the valley, the land they had worked together, before meeting her eyes. "Because the moment I pulled you back from that grave, I knew I couldn't leave you," he said. "At first, it was just about making sure you and Thomas were all right. Then—" He trailed off, searching for words. "Then it became about wanting to see you smile again, wanting to be the reason for it." Teresa's heart quickened. "And now I stay because I can't imagine being anywhere else, because this feels like home." He took a deep breath. "Because I love you, Teresa. I've loved you since before I had any right to." The words hung in the air between them. Teresa stepped closer, reaching up to touch his face. "You saved me, not just from the grave that day, but every day since." Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, both of them carrying the weight of the past. When they broke apart, Teresa rested her forehead against his chest. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted. "We have time," Kieran assured her. "All the time you need." The railroad did come to their part of Wyoming, bringing with it changes both good and bad. The town grew, prices for goods fell as they became easier to transport, and new opportunities arose. Kieran and Teresa's small homestead prospered as they were able to sell their crops more easily. Through the fall and winter, their relationship deepened. Teresa found herself laughing again, planning for the future rather than dwelling in the past. Thomas thrived under their care, growing stronger and more talkative each day. On Christmas Eve, with snow falling softly outside, Kieran presented Teresa with a small wooden box. "I'm not much for fancy words," he said as she opened it to reveal a simple silver ring. "But I want to build a life with you and Thomas, a real life as husband and wife." Teresa touched the ring with trembling fingers. "Are you sure? This land, this life, it's not the freedom you had before." "Freedom means different things to different people," Kieran said. "To me, it's the freedom to choose where I belong, and I choose here, I choose you." They were married in the spring, a small ceremony in the same church where Teresa had mourned her son and husband. Some eyebrows were raised at the speed of the union, but most of the community had come to respect the quiet cowboy who had brought the grieving widow back to life. Thomas was their ring bearer, proudly carrying the pillow with their rings. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the little boy cheered louder than anyone. The reception was held at their homestead, now expanded with a new barn and additional room on the cabin. Friends and neighbors brought food and good wishes. Even Reeves and his crew showed up, surprising Kieran. "Never thought I'd see the day," Reeves said, clapping Kieran on the shoulder. "You settling down, neither did I," Kieran admitted. "Life has a way of surprising you." As the celebration continued, Teresa found herself drawn to Samuel's grave on the hill. She went alone, needing a moment with her firstborn. "I got married today," she told the small cross. "To a good man who helped me when I was lost. I think you would like him. He tells the best bedtime stories, even better than your father did." She placed a wildflower on the grave. "I'll always miss you, my sweet boy, but I'm living again, for Thomas, for Kieran, and for myself." When she returned to the celebration, Kieran was waiting for her. "Everything all right?" he asked. Teresa nodded, taking his hand. "Everything is as it should be." That night, after the guests had gone and Thomas was asleep, they stood on the porch looking at the stars. Kieran wrapped his arms around her from behind and she leaned into his solid strength. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what? For pulling me back that day, for saying the words I needed to hear." Kieran pressed a kiss to her hair. "I think we saved each other." The years that followed brought both joy and challenges. Their farm prospered, and the town continued to grow with the railroad's influence. Thomas grew into a strong, kind boy who loved to help with the animals and ride with Kieran. In their third year of marriage, Teresa gave birth to a daughter they named Hope. As she held her newborn, with Thomas peering curiously at his sister and Kieran watching them all with pride, Teresa felt a completeness she had never expected to find again. "She's perfect," Kieran whispered, touching the baby's tiny fingers. "She is," Teresa agreed. "Our family is." When Hope was 2, Teresa discovered she was expecting again. The pregnancy was difficult, and the doctor in town expressed concerns. Kieran hovered anxiously, taking on more of the household duties as Teresa was forced to rest. One night, as a summer storm raged outside, Teresa went into labor 2 weeks early. The doctor couldn't make it through the flooded creek, leaving Kieran to help deliver the baby with only the midwife's instructions from her last visit. "I can't do this," Kieran said, fear evident in his voice for the first time since Teresa had known him. Teresa gripped his hand through a contraction. "Yes, you can. We both can." After hours of labor, their second son was born small but healthy with a powerful set of lungs. They named him James Samuel Sullivan, honoring both the men who had come before. As Teresa held her new son, with Hope asleep beside her and Thomas keeping watch by the window for the doctor, she looked up at Kieran. "I never thought I'd be this happy again," she admitted. "After Samuel died, I thought my heart was buried with him." Kieran sat on the edge of the bed, gently touching his new son's dark hair. "Sometimes the heart has to break completely before it can heal stronger than before." "You sound like a poet, not a cowboy," Teresa teased weakly. "Don't tell anyone," Kieran said with a smile. "I have a reputation to maintain." As little James grew stronger, the family fell into new rhythms. Thomas, now 8, took his role as big brother seriously, teaching Hope about the farm animals and keeping watch over baby James with solemn responsibility. On the 5th anniversary of the day Kieran had found Teresa at Samuel's grave, they rode together to the cemetery. The wooden cross had been replaced by a small stone marker and wildflowers bloomed around it. "He would be 11 now," Teresa said, arranging fresh flowers by the stone. "I wonder what he would be like." "Curious as ever," Kieran said, "smart like his mother." "Probably giving Thomas competition for who could get into more mischief." Teresa smiled at the image. "Sometimes I feel guilty for being so happy when he's not here to share it." Kieran took her hand. "He is sharing it. In every laugh, every moment of joy, he's there." In Thomas's smile and Hope's curiosity and little James's determination. Teresa leaned against his shoulder, grateful for his understanding. "How did a drifting cowboy get so wise?" "I had a good teacher," Kieran said, kissing her temple. "A strong woman who taught me that even when it feels like the world has ended, there's still something worth living for." As they rode back to their home, Teresa thought about the winding path that had brought them here. From the depths of despair at her son's grave to the fullness of the life they had built together. She thought of all the moments that might never have been Hope's first steps, little James's birth. Thomas's proud face when he rode a horse alone for the first time if Kieran hadn't pulled her back that day. The homestead came into view, now a proper farm with a larger house, a sturdy barn, and fields of crops. Thomas was in the yard with Hope, both of them waving as they spotted their parents returning. "Race you home," Teresa challenged, suddenly filled with the joy of the moment. Kieran's surprised laugh followed her as she urged her horse forward. "That's not fair." They thundered down the hill together, the future bright before them, the past honored but no longer a burden. And as they reached their children, Teresa knew with certainty that this was what Samuel would have wanted for her, not to join him in death, but to live fully in his memory. That night, with the children asleep and the house quiet, Teresa and Kieran sat on their porch as they had so many times before. The Wyoming sky was ablaze with stars, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of summer flowers. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been passing by that day?" Teresa asked. Kieran was quiet for a moment. "I wasn't just passing by," he admitted. I'd heard in town about a widow who'd lost her son. Something made me ride out there. Call it fate or instinct or just plain meddling, but I felt drawn to check on you." Teresa turned to him in surprise. "You never told me that." "Never seemed like the right time," he said. "Besides, does it matter how I got there? What matters is what happened after." Teresa leaned her head against his shoulder, watching the stars. "What happened after is that you saved me, and then I saved you right back. And now look at us," Kieran said, his arm around her, "a couple of wounded souls who found a way to heal together." As they sat in comfortable silence, Teresa thought of how far they had come from that terrible day when she had tried to bury herself with her child. The pain of losing Samuel would always be part of her, but it no longer defined her. She had learned that the heart could hold both grief and joy, that love wasn't a limited resource but multiplied with sharing, and it had all begun with a cowboy who pulled her back and said 6 words that changed everything. "He needs you still." Words that had given her a reason to take one more breath, then another, until breathing became living again. "I love you, Kieran Sullivan," she whispered, his arm tightened around her. "I love you too, Teresa Sullivan, yesterday, today, and all our tomorrows." Under the vast Wyoming sky, their story continued, not perfect, not without challenges, but rich with the love they had found in the most unexpected of circumstances. A love born from grief but transformed into something enduring and true, proving that even in the darkest moments, hope could be found if someone was brave enough to pull you back from the edge and remind you that life, with all its pain and beauty, was still worth living.